Welcome to the LOGSTAT, the Army's premier podcast on all things sustainment, where we analyze new developments, discuss current trends, and forge the path ahead for the next generation of sustainment soldiers. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the LOGSTAT. I'm your host, Captain Garett Pyle. On today's episode, we're going to be exploring the core of professionals that is said to have knowledge that is an inch wide and a mile deep, who are truly experts at their craft. These are the quiet professionals who are the technical masterminds behind every operation in the Army. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm talking about the warrant officers. Their years of wisdom and expertise will help you solve any difficult situation you may find yourself in. And over the recent years, there have been a lot of changes that have occurred within the warrant officers, especially with their education. And many others may not have a solid understanding of how one becomes a warrant officer. Thus, today we're going to be discussing all that and more. And to guide the conversation with me, I have a full panel of warrant officers from the Ordnance Corps. Our first guest, who's back on the show with us, is the Ordnance Chief Warrant Officer, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Kent Shepherd III, who's a native of Belmont, New Hampshire, and enlisted in the Army in 1996 as a 63 Tango Bradley fighting vehicle mechanic, and crossed over in 2003 to become a 915 Alpha automotive maintenance warrant officer. Chief Shepherd's most recent assignments was as the G4 Senior Ordnance Warrant Officer in the U.S. Army Southern European Task Force, Africa. His previous assignments include Fort Campbell, Fort Rucker, Schofield Barracks, Fort Bragg, Fort Drum, and Germany, with multiple deployments to Kosovo and Iraq. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Liberal Arts and Management from Excelsior University and a Master of Arts in Theology and Church History from the Rollins School of Divinity at Liberty University.
Glad to be a repeat offender back here on the LOGSTAT podcast. Look forward to the conversation, sir.
And the next, we have Chief Warrant Officer 4 Chase D. Givens, who is a native of Vancouver, Washington. He enlisted in the Army in 2003 as a 63 Bravo light-wheeled vehicle mechanic. Chief Givens served a total of 9 years enlisted and was inducted into the Sergeant R.E. Murphy Club in 2009. Chief Givens crossed over in 2012 to become a 919 Alpha Engineer Equipment Maintenance Warrant Officer. He is currently the CMF 91 Ordnance Warrant Officer Proponent at the U.S. Army Ordnance School, Fort Lee, Virginia. His previous assignments include Fort Lewis, Fort Wainwright, Fort Carson, and TWI with Caterpillar Defense, with multiple deployments to Iraq. He earned a Master of Science in Global Supply Chain Management from the University of Alaska, Anchorage, a Bachelor of Science in Military Leadership Technology from the Thomas Edison State University, and an Associates of Applied Science in Electrical Mechanical Systems Maintenance from the Thomas Edison State University. He holds certifications such as the Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and a Demonstrated Master Logistician.
Hey, thanks for the invite today. I look forward to the conversation.
And our last guest we have on with us is Chief Warrant Officer 4 Jeremy Snow, who joined the Army as a 31 Romeo multi-channel transmission systems operator maintainer in 2003. He reclassed in 2007 to a 25 Papa microwave systems operator / maintainer. In 2009, he crossed over to become a 948 Bravo Electronic Systems Maintenance Warrant Officer. He currently serves as a CMF 89/94 Warrant Officer Proponency Action Officer. His previous assignments include Fort Bliss, Fort Gordon, JBLM, Fort Lee, Korea, the Netherlands, and the White House Communications Agency, with deployments to Iraq and Kuwait. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Organizational Management, Master's in Business Administration, Executive Certificate in Strategic Leadership, and is a doctoral candidate in Strategic Leadership at Liberty University, where he'll defend his dissertation in 2026.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here to talk more about warrant officers.
I know that was a lot for everyone. Be able to have this, I think, one of my second episode of having a full panel here. So just excited to have you all here on the show today. And as we kind of get started, get the ball rolling here, I think a good part to start for the audience is, I know the Warrant Officer Corps is unique as it provides the opportunity for individuals to really become experts in their craft. So, Chief Shepherd, can you tell us about the history of the Corps, like how it came to be and, why the Army needs them?
Yeah, so glad to talk a little bit about warrant officer history. And our official birthday is July 9th, 1918, and this is when Congress established the Army Mine Planter Service. But we were pretty small back then. We only had a total of 40 warrant officers in the Army serving on active duty, and they all served on mine planting vessels. But then in 1920, the National Defense Act expanded to more warrant officer positions, and that bumped our numbers up to about 1,100 warrant officers in active duty. But we still only had one pay grade back then. This all changed in 1941 when Warrant Officer Junior Grade, W1, and Chief Warrant Officer 2 were both authorized. Warrant officers continued to grow, and by 1946, we filled over 40 different military occupational specialties. But then finally, in 1949, we made some traction with the addition of the ranks of CW3 and CW4. And then a lot happened over the next 40 years. We had a whole bunch of new MOSs that were developed across nearly every single branch. And then we saw some huge change occur back in 1986. And this was when Title 10 of the U.S. Code was amended to actually commission warrant officers at CW2. So this means when you see a CW2 through CW5, those folks are all commissioned just like regular officers. And then finally in 1991, the NDAA established the grade of CW5. And a little interesting fact for all of you, the very first CW5 to pin the rank in the entire Army was an Ordnance Warrant Officer by the name of CW5 Reno. And today, if you look across the warrant officers in the Army, we have a total of 53 occupational specialties that span over 17 different branches. So the question that you asked is why the Army needs us. You see, we are the Army's premier technical experts who manage, maintain, and operate Army systems and equipment. And I've often thought of the best way to describe warrant officers is to look at a superior non-commissioned officer. When you look at an NCO who has a burning desire to be a technical expert and they're just full of talent and they desire more leadership responsibility. And then what we do is we ignite that passion by pinning W01 on their chest. And then we can sit back and watch in amazement at all the things that they're able to accomplish as a warrant officer.
Wow. So that was just a quick overview of just the history, but wow, it's just a fascinating journey that the Warrant Officer Corps has went through in just the last 100 years, or just over now 100 years, and just seeing how it's expanded and just how it started. Well, it was only having one pay grade to start with, but how it has changed and adapted to the needs of the Army. And I think that's part of what we're going to see today is how the Corps is continuing to adapt to the needs of the Army. I know we're going to get into some of it comes to technology and how that's driving the changes. And when we were preparing for this podcast episode, and as we're kind of walking through, you showed us a great diagram of just how a warrant officer progresses through their career. And you talked about this relationship between technical skills and strategy. Can you talk more about that to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would argue that the highest degree of technical competency and proficiency that I had at repairing the Army's equipment was when I was a young W01 to CW2. You see, everything that I had learned while I was an NCO was still very fresh in my mind. And then when you compound that with all the education that I received in Warrant Officer Basic course, this made me unstoppable when it came to diagnosing equipment, repairing vehicles, and running a motor pool and just having an effective maintenance program. But as we progress as warrant officers, we start to learn more about staff functions. We learn how to integrate in and amongst the battalion staff, and then we learn how to think more clearly. We learn how to communicate our specific skill set and then interact with our commanders. And the rank of CW3 is typically that balancing point where our technical knowledge is balanced out with our staff knowledge and with our understanding of strategy. But yet, once a warrant officer crosses over to the rank of CW4, they're typically not in the motor pool. They're not out there getting grease in their fingernails. They're not diagnosing faults. We're making meetings. We're leading subordinate warrant officers. We're part of NDMP. And our exposure to the operational and strategic side of the Army explodes. And then finally, once we pin on CW5s, we are the undisputed masters. We still know our maintenance systems, we know our processes, but we are experts at harnessing all of the readiness data that we see and then working with the enterprise to solve problems before our commanders even know that they exist. And so you kind of tip the scales. Our knowledge of strategy explodes, and our knowledge of kind of that technical basis kind of gets a little bit smaller because we're not out there fixing vehicles every single day.
So yeah, I think it just really paints a great picture for the audience, understanding just how you progress through the ranks. And we're going to come back to this, this concept of technical skills and strategy, and really how that affects as you progress in your ranks. And I talked about this at the very beginning, or when you first talking through us on the history. But now when it comes to technology, because I know technology continues to impact us all, and how we've seen the Corps adapt and change in the last 100 years, I know technology is having a big impact. So, Chief Snow, can you kind of walk the audience through like how technology has truly impacted the role of the warrant officer in the force?
Absolutely. So technology has actually had a great impact on warrant officers. As equipment gets more complex, it's up to the warrant officer to expand their knowledge on the equipment that they have and to know beyond the technical manual. One of the things that you have to understand is as that equipment gets more detailed and more advanced, we have to look at, number one, how to operate the equipment, how to be able to repair the equipment, but also we need to understand the basics. So, for example, one detailed example that I do have of what I did was one of my soldiers was diagnosing a radio. He kept on having faults, and he was showing that this one circuit card kept on having problems. He replaced the circuit card 3 different times, and he could not figure out why this test set kept saying the circuit card was bad. Once he gave me the radio and said, "Chief, I just can't figure it out. The TM's not telling me what to do. I just can't get it right." Once I actually went there and I diagnosed it, I realized that one of the pins for the circuit card actually was bent. And that was actually the reason why I was throwing those fault codes, which is why technology needs to be something that the warrant officers need to adapt to, but also we need to understand the basics of how to actually implement those changes and get those repairs done.
That's next. That is such a core example. Is as much as we continue on this track of reliance on technology, we got to make sure we're always with the basics, because it's as simple as something might be bent, as you said, little plugs bent. If you become too reliant on technology, you completely miss that and just say, well, it keeps throwing this code. I don't know what to do. But it's true. Like, technology is going to continue to impact not just the warrant officers, but the entire force. And I know that's also kind of impacted the way your professional military education has went. So, Chief Givens, can you kind of start to walk us through like what changes have occurred to the warrant officer's professional military education? Because I know there's also been some confusion with a name change recently to the Warrant Officer Advanced course. So let's try to clear the air on all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's try to break it down. The easiest way for me to explain it is to just focus on what it has changed into, so we don't mess with what it used to be called. Starting last month in 1 October, we now have a Warrant Officer Basic course for W1s. We have a Warrant Officer Intermediate course for the W2s. We have a Warrant Officer Advanced course, which is a 2-phase course for the W3s. Half of it is going to be down at Fort Rucker. That's your Common Core. And then the next half is going to be back here at the Ordnance School, which is a Warrant Officer Advanced course follow-on course. As a W4, you're now going to attend Warrant Officer Senior course, WOSC, and that's going to be a 2-phase course as well. First phase down at Fort Rucker, and then the second phase back here at the Ordnance School, which is a Warrant Officer Senior course follow-on. There's also an addition of a Warrant Officer Master course for CW5s, but that is going to be a nominative course. The Warrant Officer Advanced course, the name of it is carried over from the old PME. It is an entirely different course, and it is now being covered here in both a follow-on and down at Fort Rucker as a common course, similar to what Warrant Officer ILE used to be called. And so that's kind of the confusion, I think, is where we have. But if we just focus on the FY26 and forward PME, that is the model. There's going to be one PME stop per grade as we move forward.
For the audience, so even though you did the Warrant Officer Advanced course as a 2, you still have to do that course when you put on 3.
Absolutely. It is going to be a different course now that you make W3, especially the version down at Fort Rucker, the Common Core. There is some new PME guidance that we have put out from the Ordnance School, that if you attended the Warrant Officer Advanced course as a W2, you will not have to do the Warrant Officer Advanced Course follow-on when you are a W3. And that's all of our Ordnance MOSs except for 914 Alpha. We have pushed that out to the entire force. So everybody on Compo 1, 2, and 3 that have attended Warrant Officer Advanced Course as a W2, they are essentially giving equivalent course credit for doing that Warrant Officer Advanced Course.
So, and I really appreciate you being able to kind of walk us through that, because I know when things change, there's always confusion, and then people get, okay, I've done this, and I don't have to do that. So it's good to be able to clear the air on that, and especially that now that every rank that you progress through as a warrant officer, getting that education, so that while you still have that technical skill, as Chief Shepherd talked about, you're continuously building that strategic skills as you progress forward. And then, if you can, as a follow-on, Chief Givens, if you could talk us through like how the courses have implemented some more hands-on portions.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the gaps that we had with our old PME was you would come to school as a W01 for Warrant Officer Basic course, but you would have about a 7-year break before you would actually come back for your historic Warrant Officer Advanced course. So there was a whole time during your senior W1, junior W2 time that you didn't come back here to the schoolhouse. When we implemented the Warrant Officer Intermediate course, we wanted to basically make an advanced troubleshooting stage from Warrant Officer Basic course. And one of the things that we did starting as of 1 October 2025 is we created 2 new Ordnance MOSs, the 915 Sierra and the 915 Tango. Reason behind that really was because as a 915 Alpha, when they attended PME, they could have come from over 10 different enlisted MOSs. So let's say that they were a 91 Sierra and they switched over to be a 915 Alpha. Well, during their Warrant Officer Basic course, they would have to learn Bradley modules, Abrams modules, JLTV modules, power generation modules. And with the given amount of time that we have for Warrant Officer Basic course, you really couldn't take that individual and make them a subject matter expert. And we didn't have the time to do all the hands-on troubleshooting there in that basic course. So this question kind of feeds into 2 different things. We created the 2 new MOSs because now we can take a 91 Sierra and we fed them into a 915 Sierra. And that 915 Sierra, now when they come to basic course, they're not going to have to learn about Bradleys and Abrams. They're going to focus the majority of their time in their PME on the Stryker platform. And so when we bring them back for intermediate course, what the design is for basic course, they're going to do 1 step above what they learned at ALC. When they come back for intermediate course, they're going to do 1 step above what they learned at their basic course. And essentially, you can really make a subject matter expert. And so the 915 Tango, you're feeding from the 91 Alpha, 91 Mike, 91 Papa, 91 Hotel MOSs into that have a pretty robust track background. And we can now give them a lot more hands-on training. We can give them a lot more hands-on training because they don't have to go to those other modules. And essentially, we can focus more time in those track modules. And what more time is that's more time out of the classroom, more time in the motor pool bay here at the schoolhouse, doing advanced technical diagnostics before they actually go out to their unit.
Even today, we're still creating new MOSs to meet the new demands of the world that we're living in. So it's good that the Corps is continuously able to adapt to all the new impacts. I guess one thing for clarification, because I know we're talking today about from the Ordnance Corps side of the house. When it comes to the different levels of education for the warrant officer, that's across the board, all the different branches?
Yeah, across the board, everyone has implemented this model. Every COE has a different touch on it. And so our follow-on courses, they're a little different by MOS. So our Warrant Officer Advanced course for a 915 Sierra is 6 weeks. A Warrant Officer Advanced course follow-on for a 914 Alpha might be 10 weeks. Well, if you go over to the Signal COE or the Cyber COE, they might have a totally different makeup of how they do their Warrant Officer Advanced course with their follow-on. But every COE across the Army has implemented this new model with Warrant Officer Basic Course, Warrant Officer Intermediate Course, Warrant Officer Advanced Course, and the Warrant Officer Senior Course. However they kind of put it together, it might differ, but the model is the same across the board for everybody.
Awesome. And I think that kind of will get us to the next topic is like, when do the warrant officers get their education? Because I know, like, on the officer side of the house, we go through, you're a lieutenant, you're going to BOLIC, you're a captain, you're PCS, and then to get your career course, become a major, you're going to ILE, and so forth. So Chief Shepherd, can you kind of walk us through when the warrant officers are getting their education?
Yeah, it's great that you kind of laid out with that, because in order to kind of understand the warrant officer's education, it's necessary to contrast it from the officer counterparts. And so, as you alluded to, your education is tied to a PCS. But for the warrant officers, we really very rarely actually go school en route to a PCS. By and large, the majority of our school attendance is going to be TDY and return to our home station. And so these courses that we go to are relatively short compared to our officer counterparts. And this requires officers to figure out the right time when the units are not going on a deployment or not going to a CTC rotation, and then schedule their PME education. And arguably there's never a perfect time for us to go, because commanders, they love us and they depend upon us. And so we're typically only one deep in the whole organization. So they very rarely want to let us go. But it's important to let warrant officers get their education for two specific reasons. The first one is that you want your warrant officers to continue to be experts in their craft. And this can only happen if they're constantly receiving education, especially at the breakneck pace that the Army is changing and modernizing our equipment. And then the second reason is that we have very small windows of time to receive our education before we compete for promotions. And so the best way to take care of your warrant officers is to ensure that you let them go to school at the right time so they can make those promotions.
So, and I think that's just a good way to look at it. It's really to tell the community that, hey, like, I know you have this exercise coming up, but this warrant officer needs to be able to get that education, and this might be the only time that class is offered for the year. Or for, like, I know when it comes to school schedules, like, they're not offered every day, and those school schedules aren't going to be always in line of your training schedule, and you should never delay anyone's career progression when it comes to education, and that's across the board when it comes to making sure that your soldiers of all ranks have the education they need, or get them in the courses that's going to make them a combat multiplier. And don't just be like, well, I got this exercise coming up, I can't lose. I'm like, we can always adapt and overcome. Like, make sure you get your people out there to get them educated. And that kind of gets into my next question, and this is going to be for all of you, is like, for me, having been a company commander, and then looking forward, in the future to be able to be a battalion commander one day, and for all those out there, like, for a commander, like, I mean, no matter the level, how can they best tap into the expertise of the warrant officers and their formations? And I'll start with you, Chief Shepherd.
Yeah, so I think the best way is to invite them to the table. And so ensure that warrant officers have the invitation to come and to share whatever they're managing at the battalion training meetings or at the command and staff, and enable them to have their voice heard. Especially, if you're talking about how maintenance ties to a specific organization's metal tasks, because there's certainly a correlation there. I would say you need to empower them to make positive change in your unit. Set up regular engagements to sit down and to talk with them, maybe have a quarterly warrant officer breakfast, do a group PT session with the warrant officers, do LPDs. And if you ensure that your warrant officers have a high degree of job satisfaction in your unit, they're more likely to continue serving in our Army, and they're going to continue to make a difference.
Thank you for that. Move over now to Chief Snow.
For me, the way I look at it is your warrant officers are your encyclopedias. If you remember back quite a while ago, but your warrant officers are that knowledge base that you have. And if you just ask the question, 9 times out of 10, they're going to either find the answer themselves, or they're going to find the person who knows the answer. Your warrant officers are very connected to the information, and that's their job. Their job is to find out that information for you. And that's kind of the best way to tap into that as warrant officers.
Thank you. Chief Givens.
Yeah, with this, I usually try to tell, especially junior warrant officers coming here out of the schoolhouse, it's hard to make yourself impactful in a unit unless you know what the commander's vision is and you have that dialogue with what your commander's intent is overall, because it's the commander's maintenance program, but we're kind of tasked to manage it and run it for them. And so you have to have that relationship um, between the warrant officer and the commander, that they have to have a understanding of what that mission is going to look like, what that intent is going to look like. And once you have that dialogue, once you have that relationship, I think the sky's the limit of what a warrant officer can do for that commander within that organization. But if they're just back in the back corner, and the commander just thinks that warrant officer knows exactly what they're doing without having those relationships and conversations, then they might be going a different direction than what the commander really needs or wants them to do.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I think this has all been some great advice. And one thing I can really take from each of you, it comes down to relationships. Having that relationship between the warrant officers and the command team, so you can tap into them. Right, this is your technical expert. Don't let them exist in the shadows. Don't just have them at the table, have them in the conversation, build that communication, build that relationship, and utilize their expertise, because it's going to make the entire team successful. While at the same time, as we talked about just previously, letting them get out there and get their education when they need to. So we've kind of walked now through how the Warrant Officer Corps came to be, talking through the education piece. Now for someone who's interested, like, man, maybe it's an NCO out there, or even an officer, maybe a young officer, be like, man, I want to become a warrant officer now. I want to, cross over to that. So can you kind of walk those who are interested, like anybody out there who's interested in becoming a warrant officer, like what advice do you have for them? And how do you make yourself competitive? I'll start with Chief Snow first.
So the first thing I would say for somebody who's interested in becoming a warrant officer, find a warrant officer who is of that MOS that you're interested in and latch on to them. Ask them some questions. Ask them about their daily duties. Ask them about the things that they do as a warrant officer. That's the number one way to get the most information out of being a warrant officer, or having the best information. You're going to get the ground truth of exactly what's going on. Versus reading a manual or a TM or a document, they're going to give you the information of exactly what they're doing. And some of the things to talk about being competitive, think of it just like a competition. You're going to want to do your best with this competition, whether it's your PT score or your PME, your college, your certifications. You're going to want to have the most and the best. So that way you get selected. So when it comes to being in this competition, you want to outpace all of your peers. And that's kind of the thing that you need to think of when you're talking about trying to become a warrant officer.
Chief Givens?
Yeah, here in the office with me and Chief Snow, we process a lot of warrant officer packets, and we see competitive packets versus non-competitive packets, right? To all the NCOs out there that listen to this, that have a desire to become a warrant officer, NCOERs alone will not get you selected to become a warrant officer. Even though you might have stellar NCOERs, you're competing against people that have stellar NCOERs, that also have college degrees, that have advanced certifications. And like what Chief Snow said, you really have to try to set yourself up amongst your peers, because it's a competition. And we only have so many positions that we can select you for each year. And so becoming a warrant officer, you have to put your best foot forward. The next part of that is try to get your packet in before the 12-year mark. That 12-year mark is really key, because after your 12-year mark, you require an active federal service waiver. It is hard for us to get active federal service waivers approved up at DAG1. If you do not require an active federal service waiver, it's easier for your packet to actually get in front of the board. And so it might be kind of a gamble. If you're a 14-year Sergeant First Class putting in a packet, even though you might have a pretty decent packet, it might not even make it in front of a board, because you're requiring a waiver that we just can't get approved because of how limited we are getting those waivers across the finish line.
So this question is gonna be kind of open to anyone. What is like a red flag or somebody you see in a packet like, nope, this is not going to be a good candidate? Something for people to make sure they don't want to have in their packet.
Just because you did something derogatory in the past doesn't mean that you cannot become a warrant officer in the future. One of the things that is usually a red flag is when you did something derogatory as an NCO, especially a recent. If you were a staff sergeant last year and you have a GOMAR for a DUI, that's usually a red flag for us. That, like, I don't know if they're ready to become a warrant officer yet because they just had an incident as a more senior NCO last year. That's a big red flag for us. Another red flag is when we see some really, really bad NCOERs that are kind of lined up. Sometimes you get a misfire NCOER. You'll get an MQ, an HQ, and then you can tell because you get a qualified NCOER. Maybe it's from a second lieutenant and a sergeant first class, and maybe they just weren't very good at writing NCOERs. But when you get 3 or 4 qualified NCOERs in a row, and you're ranked number 6 of 7, number 6 of 6, those are kind of red flags because you show a pattern of really not being a high performer as an NCO. And so those are 2 things that I have. I don't know, Chief Snow, do you have anything on that?
So I have the same red flags as Chase. The main thing is if you see those infractions and they're very recent, you shouldn't be a sergeant first class who has an infraction at the same time where you're applying for a packet. So that's just one of the red flags that we normally see. And then also the same thing with evals. If we're looking at your evals and they're lining up as Q, and you get another Q, and you get another Q, and they're also from different organizations, like you had a Q from one unit and then you're getting a Q from the next unit, that's normally a kind of a red flag for us for seeing like you're not just underperforming at one organization, but you're underperforming at a second organization. Those are the ones that are kind of the biggest hits for us when we see those.
So I'm going to take it on the other side of the coin now. We kind of talked about like maybe things, the red flags. What about, I know we talked about what makes people competitive. Is there anything that's like that really helps people to stand out? Because I know this is a competitive environment. People want to be able to become a warrant officer. They might have fantastic evaluation. They got good PT scores. They got the education. Is there like a, I don't want to call it the X factor, but like if you're looking at 2 packets, they're very similar. What are some other things that individuals out there could do that can really make them competitive in this, especially this technology-driven world?
For me, it's certifications. Whenever I see certifications, especially ones that are non-standard, if I see a certification that I normally haven't seen before, those are the ones that are like that show me that somebody's reaching outside of their scope and showing that they want to do something a little bit more. So certifications is one of the bigger ones that stand out, and then people who are actually reaching out there for the education. Because I've seen packets where they have almost 110 hours, but they're right on the edge of getting a degree, but they've showed that they haven't done college in quite some time. So people who are completing those degrees and getting those certifications, even if they're non-standard, those are the ones that are those ones that kind of stand out for me.
Yeah, for me, I think there's packets that we see that you can just tell the individual has gone above and beyond. Certifications is a big one. One of the big certifications that we have on the CMF 91 side is our ASC MIL 1 through 8. If you do all MIL 1 through 8, you're a military master, technician. That's a big one. If somebody actually goes through that process and does all 8 of those, paired with really good NCOERs, paired with civilian education. There's also something to seeing an individual that will max the ACFT versus somebody that just does the bare minimum on the ACFT. And so when you put all those together and you have the civilian education, the certifications, their track record with the NCOERs, but then they also go above and beyond and max on the ACFT, that person's putting their best foot forward. And when you see that packet come through, you generally know that person's like most likely going to get selected to become a warrant officer. And we do get them about once or twice aboard. We see some individuals that just have outstanding records. I mean, we see staff sergeants with master's degrees coming through to be all different types of our MOSs. And so when people are going above and beyond, it shows, and it also shows the board when they're going up for the selection.
So I know we've talked mostly from the NCO side. I know it's rare, but I know so you can get some officers that might become warrant officers. Any advice for anyone who's on the officer side? Is the advice the same? I know it is rare. I don't know if either of you have seen that before.
Yeah, and so we have seen it, but we have a pretty strict guidance on prerequisites that we want for our MOSs, whether it's a 915, whether it's an 890, whether you're a welder or you're going to be in an armament repair. Does that officer have what we're looking for to be kind of a turnkey warrant officer, walk into a motor pool and be able to manage right now? Just because you have a bachelor's degree and you're a lieutenant and you were an MCO in a unit doesn't mean that you're going to walk right into an organization and know what a Sergeant First Class knew after 12 years of being an NCO. And so, yeah, we can definitely entertain that, but we just have to make sure they meet the standard for what we're looking for from Ordnance, because we're not going to deviate from the standard for our warrant officers just because someone tried to come over from the normal commission route.
And to echo what he's talking about, we're looking for technical competency, not just meeting the bare minimum, not just having a general knowledge of what's going on. We're looking for somebody who's technically competent, who, when we look at their records and it says like this person dove deep into this field and actually have a background knowledge. For example, if somebody has tons of certifications, you may be a lieutenant, but you might have certifications in this specific field, or you might have a degree that's leaning towards that field. Those are the type of things that we're looking for. Somebody who doesn't just meet the standard of like, I know a little bit, but somebody who actually has that expertise in that field.
Well, thank you both very much. I know there's always somebody out there might have that question, so be able to kind of get your thoughts on it. My last one that I have when it comes to the becoming a warrant officer with the boards, are these standard? Is there like one board a year for those? Is there a couple boards a year? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's 6 boards a year, and our MOSs are kind of spread out amongst those 6 boards. So 915 alphas, 919 alphas, they're on every single board every 2 months. Most of our other MOSs are every other board, so every 4 months. This is on the USERAC Warrant Officer recruiting page, a breakdown of what the board schedule is, the packet deadlines, everything is published in there for people to go and view what days that those boards are. And there's also a really good table of what MOSs feed into what MOS. So if you're in an enlisted 91 hotel, what MOSs can I apply for on the warrant officer side? And so all that information's there on the USERAC website.
Well, thank you very much for that. And we'll definitely make sure that's all included in the show notes, have those links in there for people can easily have access. So as we, start to close out today's episode, I always like to give an opportunity to my guests to be able to provide some advice to the sustainment community. So this is like your opportunity to really, there's a lot of years of wisdom sitting at this table right now. So, and I'll start with you, Chief Shepherd. If you can just give us, I know you gave us some good wisdom last time, and I just want to continue on.
Yeah, so the one thing I want to talk about is just kind of contrasting an officer's career from a warrant officer's career. And when you look at an officer's career, it's kind of like an EKG readout where you've got spikes. And so as you overlay that against a career, you have a spike of stress at the company command level. And then you have another spike of stress as a KD time as a major. And another spike of stress in battalion command, another spike of stress in brigade command. And then in between those spikes, you have opportunities to do some broadening assignments, developmental assignments, opportunities to get education, to catch a breath of fresh air, to get a little more wind in your sail so that you can sprint when you go into the next command. My warrant officers oftentimes go from back to back to back tactical assignments within the brigade combat teams. And every new commander that they receive jumps in with both feet and just presses in the gas pedal because they need to have a successful command. And so the recommendation that I have for you is to recognize that the warrant officers have never left the fight, that they're always there in these tactical organizations. They're going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And in your attempt to have a successful command, don't lose your warrant officers in the process. Don't lose them along the way. If you look at my warrant officer MOSs at the W3 and W4, I am hemorrhaging talent every single year. I have so many retirements, so many warrant officers that are just getting burned out. And so my plea for you is for you to not lose them, to ensure that, yes, hit the gas pedal, but also bring them along with you and work with them and empower them and take care of them and let them know that their voice is heard. Because job satisfaction, I think, is a high degree of merit in whether or not these warrant officers will either stay in or whether they will get out and do something different.
And that is so important. So you do not want to burn your people out, and then that's just across the board. And on that, we're going to be going over here to Chief Givens.
All right. So advice to the sustainment community. I would say just sitting here at the U.S. Army Ordnance School, I have seen more changes coming than I would have ever imagined seeing out when I was out there in the motor pool. So just embrace change. We are fundamentally changing organizations right now with the tick formations with light infantry, as a lot of people are seeing at Fort Campbell and Schofield Barracks. We're going to see a lot more changes. There's potential to changing the way that we do maintenance here in the future. With that, there is a lot of new equipment coming out into these motor pools that these warrant officers, NCOs, and soldiers didn't see when they were here at the schoolhouse coming through their PME. When these new vehicles come in, try to jump on any FLIMNet that you possibly can. Try to do as much study up on that equipment as you possibly can to be relevant on the new equipment being fielded and understand the changes that are happening, because there's a lot of moving pieces here in the next few years, and just be ready for it.
Chief Snow?
For me, it would be lean forward, stay connected, and look for resources. One of the things that I've always said is you're probably not the first person to go through this problem. So some people could have already solved the problem that you already have, or also you could be the person who has the answer for a problem that somebody's looking to solve. So be connected with the community, even if it's across compos. If you're compo 1, 2, or 3, there might be somebody who's already solved this problem that you're already going through. So stay connected to the rest of the community.
So definitely thank you all for the advice. And man, have I learned so much today on this episode. So I really want to thank you all for coming in today and just really increasing my toolkit today. But and I know one thing as we close out is that there's always cards and letters. I know we might have talked about some stuff when it comes to the education track or how to become a warrant officer, or even more about the history. So where can people find you if they have additional follow-up questions? I'll start with you, Chief Shepherd.
Yeah, so I'm on the Global, and then if you go to the Ordnance Corps webpage, you'll see my face there, and there's a tile where you can click that and send me a direct note. So look forward to getting the cards and letters.
Chief Givens?
Yeah, I am on Global as well, chase.d.givens. And I am also on the USEREC website, the Warrant Officer Recruiting website. If you click on any CMF 91 Warrant Officer MOS and scroll to the bottom, you're going to find all of my contact information there.
And then Chief Snow.
I'm on Global as well, jeremy.d.snow. As well, if you go to the Warrant Officer Recruiting page and click on any CMF 89 or 94 Warrant Officer MOSs, right at the bottom, you'll see me for active duty.
So I just want to thank you all for taking the time to come in today and just providing our listeners with just a great understanding of the Warrant Officer course. You each have so many years of wisdom, and I hope our audience now knows how to more efficiently employ your skills and really how one progresses through the Corps.
Thanks, everybody. Go Ordnance.
Go Ordnance.
Go Ordnance.
Once again, thank you all so very much. To any warrant officer out there, especially those in the Ordnance Corps, we'd love to hear from you. Our upcoming spring 2026 edition of the Army Sustainment Professional Bulletin is going to be titled Army Maintenance Modernization, Predictive Maintenance, the Future of OIB Forward Repair and Telemaintenance Operations. The article submission deadline is going to be 15 January 2026. If you need any assistance with writing an article, then please reach out to me. But that's all we have today, folks. As always, sustainment leaders start here. See you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of the LOGSTAT. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Please share this episode across your formation and leave us a review. If you have a topic you'd like here discussed, then please reach out to us at armysustainment@army.mil or directly to me on Global at garett.h.pyle. Follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn at Army Sustainment. We'll see you next time. Sustainment leaders, start here.